Alright, well, hello everyone. We're going to cover some territory that I've covered before, but I kind of want to cover it again with a little bit more detail and some specific data points for you to consider. As I've gotten older, I'm starting to really question some things. For example, I've never really had the problem so much with, for example, magic being used as a plot device. And I guess to a degree I still don't, although there are certainly franchises that I avoid if they are just too rooted in real magic, which is very much a thing in some of these witchcraft covens and mystery religions and so forth. Um, so, for example, the Harry Potter franchise and world was created by a real witch, and there are elements built into that and symbolism and things like that that have ties to real Luciferian mystery religion and witchcraft. So while I have seen all the Harry Potter movies as an adult, um, I don't know that I would ever let my kids watch that, uh, just because of all the spiritual components to that. And so, like most people who, I was born in '87, grew up during the '90s. My girl cousins, of which there are many on my mom's side, and my sister and myself grew up watching a lot of Disney movies. And there's a lot of classic Disney movies that are just great adaptations of novels and things like that. And I'm not going to necessarily say that you should never watch any Disney movies ever, because there's some good stuff in there. There's a lot of American history based stuff. Davy Crockett, I think those movies were Disney, and a lot of classic literature remade into movies by Disney and so forth, and obviously some pretty iconic cartoons and things like that. But we do need to talk about how Disney was a Demolay Freemason, which the Demolay is a Freemasonic boys club, so he was inculcated into that Luciferian system from a very young age. And really, what he was doing with the stuff he was putting out there is he was normalizing magic in America. That's really just what it is. And now we're at the point where sorcery and witchcraft and fantasy are all mixed together, and it's all seen as very cool, it's very hip, it's very popular, it's very interesting, it's very exciting, it's entertainment, and this makes people very vulnerable to recruitment by the real occult. And there are secret societies, brotherhoods, fraternal orders, mystery schools, and so forth that are operative and connected to the reins of power and the world shadow government. And people are don't see that world as a threat. If anything, it's fascinating and sexy and romantic, and that was kind of the point. Walter Disney fulfilled his role very much so, in normalizing that. And unfortunately, even today, there's a lot of darkness within Disney. Like sometimes people say, "Oh, Disney would roll over in his grave if he saw this, or he'd roll over in his grave if he saw that." I'm not really so sure that that's the case. Um, Even during Disney's own time, there was rumored to be mass orgies going on within Disney. Uh, and whether that's true or not, I don't know with 100% certainty, but there's definitely mm, the insinuation and idea out there that this was happening. And that concept has made its way into books and things like that. Um, so Walter Disney, he most definitely was a Freemason, and we're going to talk about just some really interesting stuff that's in some of these Disney movies, whether we're talking predictive programming, things that were added in that weren't in the books, and other elements. Um, there's an interesting picture down here of Disney with Werner von Braun, who, by the way, this guy was a Nazi. He was in charge of a facility that it was a rocket factory that was built into the side of a mountain, and of that facility, it was said that men go in and corpses and rockets come out. So, not a great guy. I would have to go back through my notes and things that I've read in the past. I believe this guy was Operation Paperclip recruit that we brought over. And by the way, Operation Paperclip specifically was supposed to not recruit anyone associated with the Nazi Party, but that didn't happen. The U.S. intelligence services were actually creating fake identities and falsifying dossiers for the scientists that we were recruiting and bringing over to work for us, and we ended up getting quite a few Nazis over here. And there's a whole arena of inquiry that we could go into in that realm. I've talked about it a little bit. We got our anti-gravitic technology from the Nazis. It was hadn't been weaponized yet. They had some functional, I guess, prototype level stuff. The Nazis did, specifically anti-gravitic craft and Foo Fighters. And we captured that technology, and then we needed their scientists to help us unlock it, and Operation Paperclip allowed us to bring those guys over to help us develop that technology. And that technology is being operated by the World Shadow Government to this day. Things like invisibility cloaks and anti-gravity craft. But let's, I figured we could maybe start by just going through some of Disney's top 100 films. I'm going to skip some of the newer ones because there's a lot of them I haven't really watched. But I'm going to comment some interesting points on the ones that I am familiar with. And I guess in the modern era, some of the old classics have been superseded by these newer ones. I don't think I've seen either of these actually. But yeah, let's just talk about this a little bit. So Beauty and the Beast, kind of a classic, one of my favorites, and it's a fairy tale that I've always really liked. One thing that gets omitted a little bit or glossed over is that the guy's basically a werewolf, cursed by, I'm not sure what she was, a sorceress, I guess. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've watched the movie, but cursed by a sorceress, and that is really what a werewolf is. It's a human who has made an agreement with a demon, a power demon, and under the influence of that power demon is able to transform. Or there's also stuff out there in different cultures and traditions that that people can be cursed to have this affliction as well. Obviously, there's a lot of nonsense to it, like that the moon phases affect transformations, or silver bullets, have a special effect. I don't think that well, let's just put it this way. I haven't been able to substantiate some of those elements. Werewolves are most certainly real. I've talked about that in other videos. I'm not going to develop that much further, but it's kind of a darker undertone to this story that gets missed out on. And there's another element here too. The guy seems to be the beast, royalty or nobility, and that is an element to shape-shifting, and that these Nephilim descended bloodlines are they're better vessels for demonic activity. And because the Nephilim were, descendants of fallen angels, human women, and so they already have the genetics of the fallen angel side, and so they're just more suitable vessels for demonic possession and manipulation. So Monsters Incorporated, really interesting. This is really about what we would call psi vampires, or psionic vampires. So cute kids movie on the surface of things. I really liked this movie, but it's what are some of the themes in this movie? Portals, doors that can be used as portals, and basically monsters that are trying to get access to children so they can terrify them and then feed off of their fear energy, because fear is a powerful energy source apparently. Well, this is incredibly dark when you consider things like adrenochrome and the reality of entities called psi vampires that do feed on negative energy and try to terrorize people. And this is something that comes up in some of these accounts of people having encounters with cryptids where they felt like the cryptid was intentionally trying to heighten and feed off of their terror. Interesting stuff. And then, of course, we have the horror and the horror genre, which is all about trying to stimulate fear in people. Fear is not, well, as the scriptures say, God hasn't given us a spirit of fear. And there's just elements to this that are pretty dark, terrorizing children to draw energy from them. But then in the end, the script gets flipped, and the monsters realize, demons really, if you want to present it as such, the demons realize that it's actually much more valuable to become buddy buddy with the kids instead of terrorizing them. Become friends with the children, and that just opens up potential for so much more empowerment and manipulation on the demon's part of these human children. So Aladdin, this is really interesting. We have a genie. What is a genie? Well, in Eastern traditions, it's a demon. It's a demonic spirit, and it's a demonically attached object. So we have this magic lamp. It's got a genie attached. Now I know that this is coming from really literature. It's part of the Arabian Nights and all that, but it is a very occult themed story. And so this is a theme that you see actually a lot in Disney movies, which is people looking to demons to grant wishes. And what do I mean by that? Well, we've got in Aladdin an example of a demonically attached object. You have an object, the lamp in this case, that is inhabited by a demon. This is a very real thing. I forget the name of that particular doll that is possessed, and recently social media influencer was helping out moving the doll from one display case to another, and then died the next day after handling this cursed doll that had these mysterious events surrounding it, and is reputedly a demon possessed object and a cursed object. The Bible talks about accursed things. This is why Achan and his family were so harshly punished by God. They took accursed things that were used in the worship of demonic entities and demon gods from the conquered city of Jericho. And instead of destroying all that stuff and just leaving it alone like they were commanded, Achan stole some of those things. And it wasn't just stuff. The Bible calls it the accursed thing. And by bringing that into the camp of Israel, he compromised the spiritual defenses of the entire nation. And so then when they went to their next battle, they lost the battle against an inferior fighting force, and people died because Achan took the accursed thing. So that's a demonically attached object. We also have people making wishes upon a star. And it's not just any star. You're supposed to wish on what? A shooting star, right? What's a shooting or a falling star? Well, in the Bible, stars are sons of God. They're angels, spiritual beings. And so a shooting star, it would be a falling star or a fallen angel, and you're supposed to wish upon a star. You're looking to a demonic entity to grant you a wish. That's pretty interesting. And then later on, we'll see Cinderella. Again, you have a fairy godmother granting wishes. What is this? This is a demonic entity that is attached to a family bloodline. So the book that I mentioned in my earlier video that I put out there today, which is called it's called He Came to Set the Captives Free by Dr. Rebecca Brown. Talks about all this stuff in terms of spiritual warfare in the demonic realm, and demonically attached objects, demons that are attached to bloodlines, and they can be inherited. Sometimes, like someone's grandma has a demon that is a familiar spirit, and then she passes away, and then this demon passes to one of her descendants. This stuff happens. It's very real. So fairy godmother, that is a demonic entity that's associated with a bloodline. It's the fairy godmother of that family. And so you've got I believe it was Cinderella. It's been a long time since I've watched some of these movies, but Cinderella looking to the fairy godmother to grant her wishes. Well, the fairy godmother is really a demonic entity. Is the reality of it. You got a lot of these movies that do sort of just deal with gods, demigods, and stuff like that. That's really the story of Genesis 6. These watchers mingling, which are a class of angels that were supposed to have stewardship over nations and people groups, and they were supposed to sort of guard and direct people in accordance with the laws of God, but instead they became corrupted. They began accepting worship, manipulating people, controlling them, and giving restricted information to humanity, and then ultimately mingling with humanity. And that's where the Nephilim came from. And so, Hercules, that's just Greek mythology, Roman mythology, the Norse mythology. All this stuff is a reflection of that. The Mesopotamian mythologies, you have gods mingling with humanity to create these demigods. It is what it is. Alright, let's move along here. There's comments we could make about really probably all of these have various occult things added in there. In Mulan, there's ancestor spirits that watch over her family, that she does obeisance, I think is how that word is pronounced too. Bowler hat guy, just that name actually sounds really interesting. I've never seen this movie, but that sounds really interesting. A lot of these I haven't seen. The Little Mermaid, though, this is interesting. Mermaids are fascinating because the Book of Enoch says that the women who copulated with fallen angels to produce the Nephilim were cursed and became sirens, this all-female race of aquatic creatures. And they're that's pretty interesting. It's interesting, the description here, that she makes a Faustian bargain in an attempt to become human and win a prince's love. And again, it's always with the royalty, the royal bloodlines, Rael, king gods, those who have the Nephilim descended bloodlines. They have a greater affinity for what could be called magic or demonic power. Anyway, obviously you just have a lot of stuff in the Disney world that talks about witchcraft and magic, and kind of just normalizing it, making it funny, making it interesting. Peter Pan's a particularly dark story. Peter Pan is a demon boy, according to the books. And this is something where the choice of what movies they made is actually is fascinating. It's just very interesting. Anyway, Peter Pan is a demon boy. And so remember the scene at the beginning where his shadow is trying to get away from him? Well, Peter Pan's a demon. He doesn't have a soul. He's kidnapping these souls, capturing these souls. And that shadow represents the soul of a child that is trying to escape from him. And Peter Pan's always chasing it down and trying to, you know, have control of that soul that's trying to escape. And so, what does Peter Pan do? He goes and he kidnaps children and takes them to Neverland. Neverland, this just opens up a whole creepy. Neverland's a code word in the modern world. And I have another video on, I think it's titled something like You Will Never See These Lands. It's about these Epstein Island type places. It's called Neverland because kids don't grow up there. It's not magical. They don't grow up there because in the books, Peter Pan, when he gets bored with them, he kills them. He's a demon. The pirates are the Lost Boys. And that title is interesting, but the pirates are the Lost Boys who manage to escape and actually grow up. And that's why they're in this state of perpetual warfare against Peter Pan. The pirates, in a sense, now they're really not good guys, but I think they're involved in some pretty nasty stuff in the books, but they're kind of the good guys. They're fighting against Peter Pan, who is a demon and who kills the Lost Boys when he gets tired of playing games with them. Peter Pan gets along really well with mermaids, sirens. Again, we already talked about that. There's a demonic connection there, and he gets along so well with them because he's a demon. And the sirens, though, they don't like the human children at all and try to kill them, if I recall correctly. So this is a really dark story about grooming, about human trafficking, about child sacrifice and exploitation, and pretty creepy stuff. And it's also really creepy that this guy, I think his name was J.M. Barrie, came up with this story for his nephews. Like, what kind of perverted weirdo, like, what was he into? I don't really know. I haven't done a deep dive on his background, but weird stuff. Yeah, Sleeping Beauty, more magic, more curses, and more royalty. I mean, a lot of this is folklore and fairy tales and stuff like that, and some of that stuff is then rooted in the occult and in some of these things that we've already talked about. Oh, let's see. I have seen quite a few of these now, but not all of them necessarily link to. There are actually a lot of occult elements and symbols built into all this stuff, just in the trappings in the background, the set decoration, the artwork that's built into things, and so forth. Alice in Wonderland, very strange, sort of mind programming, MK Ultra related story. Cinderella, talked about that one already. Sword in the Stone, Arthurian legend is really interesting. Arthur is actually, he's the once and future king. His name is, well, I want to do a little more research on. His father was Uther Pendragon. One of the most beloved kings in English history. Again, like I said, once and future king. There's definitely a Nephilim connection here. Arthur may be a figure of the Gilgamesh, Nimrod, Amraphel, who I believe is the Antichrist figure, and that's where the once and future king comes from. He was king in the past, killed with the sword in conflict against Abraham during the War of the Kings in the book of Genesis. And then his corpse recovered in Iraq, the rumors go. And Dolly the sheep was way back in the 90s. You can bet their technology for cloning and maybe even resuscitating things is leaps and bounds ahead of where it was back then, decades ago. There is a view that holds that Nimrod, the rebel king of Babel, who hated God and tried to unite the whole earth in rebellion against God, slain by the sword, who was, according to legend, part God himself, so he's a Nephilim descendant. And there's this view, which I do hold to myself, that a resurrected Nimrod is going to be the Antichrist. And so Arthur is very much tied to that, because Arthur, the once and future king, is a figure, I believe, of Nimrod. And there's other demonic elements to that story as well. For example, the Lady of the Lake is a demonic entity that gives this sword to King Arthur, Excalibur. Well, this is not the only incident of this in history. I mentioned this in another video somewhere. I don't remember which video or what the name of it was, but I came across this same phenomenon in trying to think if it was Josephus or Herodotus. It's one of those two. Anyway, there's this one barbarian tribe that they had these iron swords that were avatars of the war god Ares, and they would make sacrifices to these swords. They would bathe these swords in the blood of their captured prisoners of war in order to get that god, or really demon's, favor over their tribe and extra prowess in warfare. And that's exactly what's happening in Arthur as well, getting Excalibur, this legendary sword. But the intention is that this Lady of the Lake, a demonic entity, is giving him this sword, and it's to be returned with blood. In other words, that's her price. She wants him to take this sword and go out and reap souls with it, and then give that sword back with the blood of his enemies on it. And the Lady of the Lake is very much a real entity, a demon that is worshipped today. Nathan Reynolds talks about this in some of his stuff, that the Lady of the Lake is worshipped at Lake Havasu, which is where the London Bridge was moved to. The London Bridge being one of the most occult structures in the world, where there were these chambers underneath it where ritual murders were carried out, including murders of Christians, and buried within it were these ritual sacrifices that were performed as the structure was built. And this is done to build up spiritual power in the occult satanic world. You know, there's a system of iniquity, of bloodshed and wickedness that gives people power and prestige and influence with these demonic entities. It's kind of like the exact opposite of what God's church and God's people are supposed to be. But this Lady of the Lake entity is still worshipped out west in the United States. And that's the same Lady of the Lake that features in this legend, apparently, that gave Excalibur this demon weapon to Arthur, the once and future king. This ties in with a lot of stuff, and I'll probably do a video on it, Lord willing, pretty soon. There's a reason why Arthur is the name of the main character in Aquaman. And what is he? Well, he's half mermaid, siren, okay, Nephilim, and half human. And he has this name Arthur. Okay, so he's named after a mythical Nephilim king. And yeah, it's just and then eventually Arthur becomes, you know, like one of the leaders of humanity, who's uniting the Atlantean hidden underwater world with the human realm. And he's like this great world leader. He's basically an Antichrist figure, is what's going on there. And he is a Nephilim descendant. Aliens, Pirates of the Caribbean. There's a ton of occult stuff in there where you have like these avatars of gods interacting in the story. There's a lot of blood magic, curses, and all kinds of weird stuff. That's a very occult. The Rescuers, there was nudity in one of those movies, I forget which, and a bunch of copies had to be pulled from the shelf and republished. That's something that these Disney artists have often done in many of the movies, is stick, little things in there like sex written in the clouds in the Lion King movie or what have you. Fantasia. Every once in a while they remake this, and there have been a lot of remakes, and this is reportedly, a lot of books talk about this. This is reportedly a piece that gets used for MK Ultra mind programming. Just the way the imagery and the music is presented, it's designed to put people, especially children, into a mental state that opens their mind up to manipulation. I was strangely fascinated with this movie when I was a kid. I don't remember which iteration of it. But my parents always found it kind of weird, kind of creepy, and I only saw it maybe once or twice. Okay, more Pirates of the Caribbean. A lot of stuff with the royals, and the reason for that is they're trying to build a rapport between the common people and the royals, those who rule over us. Royal just comes from, well, there's a couple different origins of the word in various Romance languages, but it's from Re-El, or king god. These are families that are Nephilim descended bloodlines, and with those bloodlines come some supernatural abilities. Someone pointed out the other day that all the Marvel movies, the superhero stuff, it's foreshadowing. It's foreshadowing of the return of the Nephilim, these king god bloodlines, and as I've already mentioned, these bloodlines have greater affinity for supernatural abilities and for being utilized by demons. And they want normal people to have a favorable view of royalty because it makes us easier to manipulate and easier to control. Alright, let's see. Again, more Fantasia. National Treasure. That was all about making Freemasons look like cool heroes, protectors. They're the good guys, don't you know? No, they're not. They are not the good guys. They most definitely are not the good guys. If you don't know about Freemasons, I talked about that a little bit in my last video. The purpose of the organization is to rebuild the Royal Arch, or the Temple in Jerusalem. It's a Luciferian organization, looks at Lucifer as very favorable, and their god, one of the rites, the Royal Archmason, is told the name of Freemasonry's god. It's not Jesus. It is a religious system. It's intended to hide Luciferian mystery religion in plain sight in Christianized societies. There's always a lot of movies about Santa Claus. Santa, so he's clearly a supernatural entity, okay? He's spying on all the children in the world to see who's naughty and nice, and in a lot of old traditions, he was not a jovial, cookie-eating fat guy. He was basically a demonic entity like the Krampus, who would eat children alive, or leave them switches and coal, or play pranks on them and things like that, or terrorize them if they were naughty. What is this? This is, he's a satanic figure, and he has an army of elves. What's another word for that? Goblins or demons. At his disposal at the North Pole. And, if you know anything about the sides of the North and things like that, the North Pole is a very, there's a lot of spiritual and supernatural elements to that. So it's Santa Claus. But that's just, everyone wants to put out Santa Claus stuff in general. Let's see if there's anything else here. Yeah, shape shifting into animals again. That's being normalized. It's a very real thing. I don't really know like what types of animals, from what I understand. There is a difference too between shape shifting into something and being able to like kind of astral project and control something using one's spirit body. Two different occult technologies, two different elements of witchcraft. The Navajo peoples and some of these other tribes have various traditions and information about types of creatures that can be shape shifted into, or that can be controlled, I guess. That's becoming increasingly normalized, though, by fantasy and various movies and stuff like that. All right, so we've hit some of the highlights there, and background of some of these is pretty interesting. And then we'll just hit a few more that I pulled up that weren't on the list. The Island at the Top of the World, one of my favorite movies. I actually have it on DVD. Haven't watched it in a while, but yeah, really interesting that there's this livable island at the top of the world that time has kind of forgotten, and these explorers go up there and in an airship and have their adventures. Return to Oz. This is significant because Dorothy gets there's elements in this that weren't in the books, apparently. Dorothy gets put in a sanatorium or a mental institution, basically, and she's being subjected to all this torture, electrotherapy, and things like that. And so it's kind of left up to the viewer. Like, it's strongly suggested she's being MK Ultra mind programmed, and that maybe she dissociates, and then her subsequent adventures in Oz are actually her, just she's still there in the sanatorium, out of her mind, is one theory, because of the torture that she's undergoing. So it's kind of a dark, yeah, there's a reason it's a dark fantasy film. And Disney has a penchant for injecting elements like this into films that weren't there to begin with. Another example is Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which there's this character called the Child Catcher, I think, who is dressed all in black, looks really creepy, and has an abortionist's hook. And apparently this character was not in the original book. Was it this one? I'm trying to think if it was this movie or there's another one about Babes in Toyland, which was babes being children, not, attractive women. Before you start asking, like, what in the world were you watching growing up? Maybe I have the movie wrong. It might actually have been, well, let's see. The Child Catcher. Just looking to see if. Yeah, no, there it is. The Child Catcher. Yeah, this was interjected into the story. Not apparently in the books. Weird. Creepy. There's other elements here as well. Well, let's talk about royalty. So, Psalm 2 talks about those who rule this earth realm and how they know there's a God, absolutely, and they hate him. And so they want to destroy knowledge of him, and so they're stirring up the masses constantly, keeping us distracted, keeping us managed, and keeping us caught up in vanities, which are empty or purposeless pursuits, keeping us distracted spiritually, dead spiritually, keeping us from knowing or recognizing the Creator, because the royals who know God exists and who hate him, they don't want to be reminded of him, and so they figure if they can erase all memory of God, then they win, and they can remake this world in their own image and live as if God doesn't exist. And of course, they're very interested in things like technologies that extend their life and so forth, because obviously they aren't too keen on dying and then having to be answerable and accountable to God. And Psalm chapter 2 is a real interesting study on this, the relationship between the rulers of this world and those they rule over, and how the rulers' hatred for God affects how they rule and how they govern the masses. And there's just these odd patterns that emerge. For example, U.S. presidential relationships to King John Plantagenet. So this is another element of Freemasonry. Well, the head of Freemasonry is always the British Crown, regardless of whether they are a Freemason or not, although a lot of British royals are Freemasons. And you can see them in their Masonic regalia with their Masonic aprons and stuff. If you pay attention and you know what you're looking for, you can see it in these ceremonial affairs. And, making the masses enamored with royalty and look favorably upon royalty makes us easy to manipulate. That's the idea anyway. And so I have a very dim view. I think that the Americans who get all wrapped up in, oh, what are the royals doing? Who's marrying who? And what did so-and-so wear at this social thing? I think they're a bunch of brainwashed fools, to put it bluntly. We fought a war, or at least it appears that we did, to get away from the tyranny of George III and the royal families, but really they've always exerted influence. And I don't know if this U.S. presidential relationships to King John Plantagenet is one thing human beings are really good at is inbreeding. And so that might just be what's going on here. But with the exception of Van Buren, all U.S. presidents have had a relationship to King John Plantagenet. And you can click see relationship for, say, George Washington, 15th great grandson. John Adams. No relationship found, but then you can click check if they're related through marriage, 19 degrees from John of England. And all the ones that I was clicking through. So basically, there was a middle school, high school gal who her father was into genealogy, and so she did a genealogy project for school, and she kind of uncovered this, that with the exception of Van Buren, now actually I'm going to check and see if they're related through. So Van Buren is still 22 degrees from John of England, I guess by marriage. Yeah, that's real interesting. So her research showed that Van Buren was the only one that wasn't connected, but it looks like he actually is. By marriage, 22 degrees from John of England. That's real interesting, according to this reference anyway. But yes, even Barack Obama, which is pretty wild, right? You wouldn't think, but he's the uncertain, it says, but interesting stuff. Well, uncertain, I presume, because there are things that are being intentionally obfuscated regarding our good friend Barack Hussein Obama and Donald Trump. Let's see. Related through marriage. 26 degrees, yeah. Interesting stuff. Did we really manage to throw off the royals after all? I don't know. This is a training manual for deliverance ministry that has a lot of experience with doing exorcisms. And one thing that they mention is that these demonic entities often take the persona of Disney characters and princesses. So there's different elements to it, where sometimes the individual has delusions related to this stuff. And then other times the demon entities are using the names of these characters to identify themselves. That's pretty wild. Pretty wild. Now, Pan is actually a mythological demon anyway. Well, I say mythological, but maybe he does exist, and we get words like pandemonium or panic from the word pan. And so this is some interesting stuff. Anyway, I just thought I would bring all this up. As a parent, I guess you have to kind of decide how you're going to raise your child. For my part, I think I'm going to really avoid, like, there's still stuff I think in Disney that I would maybe let my kids watch. I'll have to be careful about that, and obviously, if I ever get married, talk these things over with my spouse, and then very carefully make sure that the stuff that they are allowed to see is doesn't have, these. Well, let's just put it this way: you got to be careful. It's a matter of degrees, I guess. And I guess you could maybe say it'd be safer just to not do Disney movies at all, but there is some value in some of them, I think. But one thing I'm not going to do is encourage my daughters to be little princesses, because royalty are incredibly corrupt. They're not answerable to anyone. They've been degenerates for thousands of years. Tiberius, who was the Roman emperor during Christ's time, was a voracious pedophile. And in the modern era, archaeologists have found dozens of child skeletons on the rocks below his seaside villa. And this is just typical of these people. They see themselves as above the masses. Part of that is their Nephilim bloodline. This is pretty characteristic of Nephilim and Nephilim descendants. They have longevity and attributes, intelligence that do put them above the rest of humanity. They see themselves as a different species and better than the rest of us, and we are cattle for their amusement. And so down through the ages, there haven't been that many benevolent rulers, not really. There's a lot of them who are doing what they could get away with whenever they could. And that's just the nature of the world we live in. Spiritual warfare. It's always been there. And I just thought I would do this little video about Walter Disney's role in all this stuff. A lot of people say that Disney would be rolling over in his grave at some of the things going on at Disney. Children disappearing at these Disney theme parks, and the rampant grooming and wokeism and just disgusting things being portrayed in Disney media, and preying on children and the pedophilia. I honestly don't know that he would roll over in his grave at some of this stuff. There were some strange things going on at Disney during his own lifetime, and the whole purpose of Freemasonry is to hide some things from the public eye so that you can maintain a veneer of Christian respectability while you're still, dallying with prostitutes with your Order of Jesters buddies, at the local lodge or wherever. Anyway, I hope you found this to be interesting. Have a good one.